I hereby call to order this meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee on December 14, 2022 at 7 p.m. I am Linda Lukowski, Chair of the School Committee. I want to welcome everybody here tonight. A reminder that this meeting is being audio and video recorded. I'm going to read our vision statement. We are a community of learners known for unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families and a wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners. Students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. Can we please rise for this Pledge of Allegiance? The next item is the chairperson's remarks. If you were able to attend the Addams Family production here at the high school, you saw a wonderful production by our talented students and their theater teacher and director, Natalie Safely. At our National Honor Society induction ceremony, our student rep, Andrew Doherty, was an inductee. Congratulations to Andrew and all of our inductees. Thank you to their advisors, Mrs. Norton and Mrs. Galante, for their time. Also, as I look around the room tonight, I see our elementary principals, the STEM teacher, the SEL teacher, and one of our speech language professionals. It reminds us that it takes a village to do all of this work. We have amazing faculty and staff in our district that engage with our students and make a difference in so many different ways, just by seeing all these teachers here tonight. The next item is the Student of the Month, and I will hand this to Narissa.
So, Student of the Month agenda. This is one of my favorite items on the agenda. The Student of the Month program was established in 2019 by the school committee to honor exemplary students. Nominations are collected throughout the year from staff members at all 5 schools. Nominations are made through 5 categories: service to fellow students, teachers, or community; dedication, determination, or persistence in the face of obstacles; attitude towards learning and determination; high achievement in academics, athletics, or performing arts; or significant improvement in academics, athletics, or performing arts. The selections are made each month by the chair of the school committee, the superintendent, and one member of the policy and advocacy subcommittee. We are very pleased to welcome the December 2022 Student of the Month, Sophia Bagley. We'd like to invite Mrs. Poulin to come up and tell us about why she nominated Sophia.
I shouldn't have told you that.
Am I going this way or this way? This way, okay. So my name's Colleen Poulin. I'm the speech and language pathologist at Salisbury Elementary School and been there for many, many years. And I've known this lovely girl for a long time. And I remember her dad coming into our sessions playing with that little house. And he would sit right down on the floor. And this awesome person is a reflection of all of her whole family's here. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And I want to thank you guys for accepting this nomination, because oftentimes this award is given to the extraordinary. But Sophia is kind to her soul. And I just have to briefly tell you a quick story, and this is how this all happened. I'm kind of like the utility player in terms of, what do you call it? The duties, like the bus duty and the crosswalk and, you know, whatever, right? So it was like the 4th day of school. Fourth day of school, and I'm the greeter. And fourth day of school, put your imagination right into the 4th day of school. Kids are like, I have 3 or 4 kids. Hey, my summer was great. Look, great, awesome, get the car, go. Crying kids, they couldn't find anything. One little girl is hysterical. And I have 4 kids that I'm dealing with. And I'm going, I don't know what to do. I'm the greeter. I'm like at Walmart, I'm the greeter. I can't leave my post. And then along comes this little angel. And she comes right behind this little girl. Remember that? You put your arm right around her. Don't worry, Miss Colleen, I got this. I said, you know where you're going? Yep, I'm going to bring her right to class. I'm like, okay, cool. The day goes on, and I remember you coming down to my office, and she goes, hey, I just want to let you guys know that she's okay. I checked in on her. But the cool thing about Sophia is, I don't even think you realize how kind you really are. That wasn't extraordinary for her. That's something that she does all the time. And then the other thing I want to say is that I was listening to you as you were saying the qualifications to get the Student of the Month. You are one of the most enthusiastic learners I know. Just today, what did we talk about? She wants to be a writer. Yep. She's writing a book, and I'm going to be the first one to get that signed copy of that book. And I can't think of anybody better to represent Triton, but more importantly, represent Salisbury, because we're all Salisbury, right? I thank you, and I thank you guys. You guys are amazing. So that's it. Get this thing right here, okay?
This is for you. Congratulations. Keep up the great work.
Congratulations. Nice job. You okay with some pictures? Yeah. With your family? Come on. Let's get you all into a, want to do it over there? Go that way. Yeah, you guys all? We need the chair in there.
Very happy to get you in there.
Oh, you took 7, good, because I wasn't sure if you had a good profile. Okay.
You guys are more than welcome to stay, but you don't have to if you don't want to. The next item is oral communications from the public. Members of the public may address the committee for up to 3 minutes, longer with the permission of the chairperson. The committee will not engage in a discussion on topics raised during the public comment, but may choose to add the topic to a future agenda. This agenda segment will be limited to 15 minutes. Are there any members of the public who wish to address the committee? Seeing none. The next item is the consent agenda. The consent agenda contains one donation tonight, $1,055 to purchase library books donated by Brenda O'Connell in the memory of Carolyn O'Keefe. Can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? The next item is new business. Would any members like to raise items for inclusion on a future agenda?
Did you skip answer?
I did.
You don't want to skip answer.
The next item is our student representative, Andrew.
Good evening, everyone. I am pleased to provide the most recent insight into the current events involving Triton High School students at the endpoint of this year. So I'm first going to be starting off with sports. So I'm pleased to report that winter sports teams are just beginning their respective seasons and have several exciting games coming up. The teams that will be representing Triton High School this year in the Cal League are the boys hockey team, the boys and girls basketball teams, Triton indoor track, Triton swimming, Triton wrestling, and Triton winter cheerleading. I wish the best of luck to these teams and their players in their seasons. Moving on to some activities occurring in Triton. Just recently, 22 Triton juniors and seniors were inducted into Triton High School's chapter of the National Honor Society. We would like to wish a congratulations to those who have been inducted and to those who are already serving. And we hope they represent the best qualities of the National Honor Society and here at Triton. In addition to this, for the first time ever at Triton, 6 Triton students have just been inducted into our very own chapter of the Drama Honor Society. The DHS is a new organization that boosts our current theater program and helps excel those who like really like put together, like say the Addams Family that just happened. We wish these students all the luck with their future theater productions. And speaking for our theater program, I'm very proud and for all the students, musicians, technicians, custodians, and volunteers that helped with the successful production of the Addams Family musical. Attendance was very high, and spirit, everyone loved it. And I'm excited to see the next production that they have in store for us. Returning back to before Thanksgiving, I'm pleased to announce that the Spirit Week dance and festivities were very successful and enjoyed by all those attended. The student body greatly enjoyed watching events such as the student-produced skits, participating in sports events, watching teachers perform a cheer routine, and seeing the junior class officers being pied in the face. Many students and their teachers were especially happy that the decorations and overall spirit of the event were reminiscent of a time before COVID, something that everyone was kind of hoping to see. And I'd like to thank all the students, teachers, and volunteers that helped pull off this amazing event. Next up, I'd like to talk about just the upcoming Christmas break and how student spirit seems to be really high as this next section is the last week of 2022. And to make student spirit even higher, Triton Student Council is organizing dress-up days where students and teachers can show their spirit, such as dressing up as Hawaiian Christmas or reindeers. And it's just these small events that really retain and boost the school spirit and show we can have fun and get work done at the same time, something that Triton's always been known for. Unfortunately, recently we've seen a mass wave of varying sicknesses to hit Triton High School, even as we move past the COVID wave. Many students and teachers have taken the precautions to stay home and rest up, and I wish the best for those not feeling well right now and hope we can get past this wave of sickness as we move on to the next year. So I thank you guys so much for letting me give the final report for 2022, and happy holidays to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
So first of all, congratulations on your induction into the National Honor Society. But I would like to know the all-important question about homecoming. Which class won?
The senior class won.
Oh, all right.
But it was a very close race. But everyone had a great time. And surprisingly, the freshman class, they were very into it. Usually the freshman class doesn't perform as well, but the freshmen, all the students were into it. They really got a hold of homecoming. The decorations were amazing. So it was just good to see the wave of school spirit starting at freshmen and moving all the way up. So I guess it can only get better from here. So thank you though.
So do you think your class can beat I guess they'll be sophomores next year, or?
Easily, yes.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the elementary STEM and SEL program update. I'd like to thank our new STEM teacher, Joanna Leet, and our new social and emotional learning teacher, Julie Benson, for joining us tonight. And I'm going to pass this off to Brian.
All right, so what? Very close, sorry. Still very close. So if you both can come up together. You want to sit, there's 2 open seats. Sit right at the table. So we, as you know, we added 2 positions. What we really wanted was a social and emotional teacher at every elementary and a STEM teacher at every elementary. What we ended up with was one that we're sharing, and we thought it was helpful to have you hear from them the work that they're doing. Again, we would much rather have more of them, but I think they have done some incredible work. So I thought it was important for you to hear directly from the 2 of them on what they've been doing. I don't know if you want to add anything, Anna.
I actually do. So I think we're so fortunate to have these positions, even though they're sort of a third of the time at each school. I just want to recognize the work that the principals have done as well to schedule this time in for all of our students. And just say that it's not just the positions, but to have Joe and Julie in these positions is just a wonderful thing for our students. So I get to see them in action. I get to sort of hear in different meetings how students are making connections to what they're learning in each one of these classes. But I'm glad they're here tonight to share this with you too. Joe, would you like to start? Sure. Yep.
Hello. Okay. There's a slideshow that I sent or shared with some photos. So first, at each school, STEM or STEAM or Makerspace is interchangeable. So I just defined those quickly, that it's the purposeful integration of science, technology, engineering, and math. I know at Pine Grove, it's the STEAM Lab, and that's just integrating arts into the science, technology, engineering, and math. And then there's a Makerspace in the name of the room, the designated room. And a Makerspace is really a designated space where students can collaborate, build, create, tinker, invent, and innovate. So I use all three terms interchangeably, and I think the students and staff also do too, but just to clarify. Really, the highlights for me so far have been being able to teach all students grades K through 6 in the elementary schools, purposeful STEM lessons. And it's been great to have equity across the district in all the grade levels. I really use Atlas curriculum mappings to help support the science and math curriculums. And I use the mathematical and science and engineering practices as my continuity thread to weave through for all grade levels, because those practices don't necessarily get highlighted enough in classrooms, so they get reinforced in the STEM lab. And I think it's been really wonderful to have the teachers in all of the lessons, because they provide really wonderful formative assessment data for teachers to watch their students learn in a different way than the maybe traditional academic classroom. They get to see how they process and think. STEM classrooms can be a place where students shine that they necessarily may not shine in other parts of their school day. It's typically really hands-on learning for them. I have some personal stories that I can share, but some of my goals are to develop 21st century thinkers and learners, increase problem solving and critical thinking skills with hands-on activities, really increasing collaboration and communication, especially on the heels of a pandemic where students had to be separated. I think that's where some of the joy comes in, from their abilities to work together again and learn how to collaborate. And really, those are lifelong skills that will make successful humans. And I really would like to be able to promote productive struggle, and I think carving out a specific time for STEM learning to happen helps give children time to have productive struggle. And I love reframing failure. In the words of Mark Rober, the NASA and YouTube wonder if anyone knows him, he uses the Mario Brothers technique, where I ask students if they play a video game, and almost all say yes. And how many times do you fall down the little pit of despair and you try again? And they all say yes. And I ask how many times they'll try again, and they say over and over and over for hours and days. And if we can reframe trying and to embrace the try and reframe failure, I think we'll create successful learners in the future, no matter what they come up against. And I can see visible sparks of joy in the faces of the students. And there's some pictures that I said to highlight that. Yeah, thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? Thank you. Your presentation was, well, I think she pretty much captured everything that we would have wanted to ask her. Just the fact that they're able to do hands-on science and everything else that you're doing, engineering, I think it's wonderful. I just do have one question. I know that in years past, they've used 3D printing in the other schools and stuff. I know that you're not using it at any of the schools this year. Do you have any thoughts of doing that in future years?
Yes.
I know it's tough with a group of students that usually only one or two students can do it at one time, but.
Yeah, I think I have some ideas that I came up against some struggles by only being in a building for 2 weeks. And then the time I was there, trying to capitalize on hooking students into STEM. I think for me personally, it's a future goal. I would love to collaborate with high school students to really bring a district-wide STEM feel. And maybe even, I've talked with Kathy Norton a little bit about, Catherine actually introduced me to Kathy to see if we could even get some high school students down into the elementary schools to help introduce it and kick it off. And then other teachers that would be interested in keeping it going while I'm not in those buildings.
Yeah. Is there
it is
any
time
interest in robotics and stuff coming down to the elementary schools?
So I have a meeting with the TEF. Greg Kulowicz introduced an item to me called the Microbit. It's a 5x5 LED screen that you can, it holds one code at a time. It has sound and it has, I don't know if anyone's familiar with it. There's some nods in the group, but you can code as many things as you want on a device, and then you plug in and it will hold the code. So he was thrilled to be able to talk about this cool device. So I'm going to talk with any TEF on the 20th and hopefully be able to get a seed planted for coding and robotics in grades K through 6 that can launch itself into a platform for middle school and high school.
Absolutely. I think it's wonderful.
And can I just add, I was at Newbury the other day and met Spot, that incredible Boston Dynamics dog. So it's not, they will be coding, right, in the future with those microbits, but there are other experiences that are being brought in that embrace and support that as well. So I was blown away. I thought it was awesome. It was just me.
I just think it's exciting to finally see this happening for our students. Thank you.
Can I say one more thing, just to make sure everyone remembers? So the way that the schedule is happening, so it's a 2-week residency. So there's 2 weeks with STEM, 2 weeks with SEL, and then 2 weeks off. And so that's the way the rotation works. So just so that you're remembering.
Great. Hi, I'm Julie Benson, the SEL teacher. Oh, thanks. Oh, push it. Is that better? Oh, there we go. So like Joe, I am in all 3 elementary schools. I'm working with kindergarten through 6th grade. In each school, I see the classrooms, I'd say anywhere from 2 to 4 times per cycle. The curriculum I'm using is called PATHS, which was selected by a committee throughout the elementary school district. And as it's been going on, I've been working through all 7 curriculums from the same company, but through each of the grade levels. It's an amazing curriculum. I'm really enjoying it. Kindergarten includes puppets and songs and a lot of hands-on activities. And each grade level obviously is developmentally geared for their needs. But the language is common through kindergarten through 6th grade, which is something that I'm really pleased to see. While the language and the activities are obviously diverse and different, I'm starting to see that the language across the schools are starting to come together, which I think is really important. As a former school counselor for 17 years, I worked mostly with small groups or individuals with students in the Tier 2 and Tier 3 needs. It is really wonderful to be able to work with all students and help them develop socially and emotionally. I think it's important for our students in the Tier 2 and Tier 3 to see their classmates also talking about emotions and feelings and struggles, and to see that we, to normalize feelings, to normalize talking about, challenges. And, some of the terms we use is, which is across the grade levels, is stop, make a plan, and go. So kids are learning about when you encounter a problem or an issue, what does stop mean? And we break it down in between the physiological impact of our bodies, recognizing how we feel physically, connecting it with our mind, and then getting our bodies and mind in control so that we can problem solve and make good choices. As far as emotions and feelings, the program emphasizes that there are no bad feelings, that we break it up between comfortable and uncomfortable, and that when the uncomfortable feelings show up, they're not pleasant, but it's normal. And what do we do when they show up? What's our plan? And again, it's trying to help kids be getting comfortable being uncomfortable and navigating very normal challenges. The goal is to help students in that Tier 1 model to be able to learn skills and strategies so that they can navigate typical issues, recess, the hallway, lunch, frustration within the classroom, and being able to develop the skills so that they can self-regulate on their own. Maybe they need a little bit less from the adults around them, which is less referrals to the Tier 2 and Tier 3 model. And it's just been wonderful to develop relationships with all students, like across the board. I have to say the principals have been so amazing. I was in one district for a long time, and I was very happy there. But I have never received so much support, whether it's a schedule change. All three schools have been so open to hearing my feedback, to say, listen, combining these 3 classes together, they're just not getting what they need. And then they go back, they revamp, they give a new schedule out to help me. And I'm just so grateful for that, because it really shows how much the elementary is unified and seeing this work. I've asked Anna over and over, can I have more of this? Can I try that? And it's like, here you go. So whatever you need to make this work. So I think that it's working not just because of when I'm in the classroom, but as a community coming together to say SEL is a priority. It's important. We all need this. Like Joe said, the teachers are with me in the classrooms, which is really important. I've recently asked for more posters so that they can go up in the classroom, so that when I leave, the messages, the different, the language we're using is more visible. And I looked at that as a slow transition anyways. I didn't want to come into all 3 elementary schools and say, take down your zones of regulation or take this down. But teachers have been coming to me saying, do you have more of this? Can you offer more of that? So I'm taking their feedback, going to the district and saying, there's a need for this. Is that possible? So I'm seeing things really slowly rolling out. And it's been wonderful to develop relationships with kids in the cafeteria, in the hallways, and even seeing Sophia, I was like, I see probably 1,000 kids, so it's really awesome to be able to start to develop relationships, which is tough when we're there for 2 weeks and we move on. There is some regression, I'll just be honest. My first class back is spent really reviewing and trying to catch kids up after 5 to 6 weeks of an absence, depending on holidays or vacations. So, that's just the nature of it. It would be great to see a little more momentum with that, but with what we have, it's definitely been really wonderful to see how much they are using. And some of the kindergarten and first grade teachers are telling me that they're watching their students using strategies like doing the turtle and all the little cute things that we do in the program. So I could probably go on and on. I love this stuff. But I certainly can take any questions if you have.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah. Oh, boy. Yeah.
I'd just like to add something. I feel like the statement you made of having younger students be comfortable with the uncomfortable speaks a lot of volumes to me, because in high school right now, people being uncomfortable in life is common. It's a common feeling, and I feel like maybe if I had that, or my friends had that when we at that age, it would have helped us a lot more. By getting this started now, it's a push to have kids. They're gonna have to cram study at night. It happens, but if they understand how to overcome adversity, it's gonna really change, just how they overcome obstacles in life.
Yeah.
And like you said, depend less on the teachers and more on themselves. And that's what a school is trying to do: build students for life. And I feel like this is one essence in a school that we've tried to hit upon, but this is really gonna help push that forward. So I thank both of you for the STEM program and the emotion. So thank you.
Thank you for your feedback on that. And that's really helpful to hear, because that's the goal, is starting. It would be really exciting to see our kindergartens this year, what that will look like when they enter high school. Even just sitting with kindergartners today, we talk about, just all those uncomfortable feelings. The emotion today was being scared, and no one wants to be scared, but scared shows up sometimes. Anger will show up, frustration shows up. So what's your plan? And we talk about that choices and behaviors are separate from the of feelings, that you don't get in trouble for feeling angry, but there are consequences if we use our anger to hurt someone or say something unkind. So it's having them be able to validate those uncomfortable feelings and saying, we all get mad, and I'll tell personal stories too, we all get sad, and that's okay, so what's our plan to make good choices? So I think our choices and behaviors are really that to me is like the golden nugget, and that so that they can still feel like, well, I can own my anger, it's all right, I have a right to be angry in this situation. So hopefully, yeah, that will build and the resilience will through as they grow up.
So thank you both for this. I do have a couple of questions on the SEL side.
Yep.
One of them, I think, is especially since the kind of pandemic started up, we heard a lot about students who are internalizing that hadn't necessarily been seen by a counselor before, but there was clearly something going on. And I guess my question for you is, do you think that some of what you're doing is actively addressing that, or are you detecting students, I guess, picking up on them earlier that might be having kind of those internalizing and getting them some additional Tier 2 help?
Yeah.
I guess, how is that playing out?
Yeah, so I'm not necessarily screening students for referrals, but certainly I actually have been going to the different counselors and social workers in the 3 elementary schools, not knowing who's on IEPs or 504s or who's already receiving services. So when I've been picking up on some certain like resistance or kids shutting down, I have been reaching out, and most of the times they're already receiving some type of support. But there was a situation in a 5th grade class where I was doing something that it was more just a check-in, and for whatever reason, this particular class, and again, I'm new and I don't spend a lot of time in each class, but one boy shared something pretty personal or upsetting about his an illness with a parent, and that then turned into someone else talking about a cousin that was very ill. And then I had another student start to cry watching the other students struggle, and it turned into, it was pretty intense and unexpected for me, not knowing, because certainly we were talking, I think, just about like we're doing a thorn and rose check-in, but for whatever reason, this class was just very vulnerable and sensitive, and we pulled it together. I did a relaxation exercise. We shift topics. I tried to get them in a safe place so that when I left, they were okay. But I did loop back around to the teacher. I checked in with the social workers. I think even Catherine, we had mentioned it in a meeting that had happened, and so then it was like, so what's the plan to support these students? So I think that ultimately some of the work I'm going to do is going to be triggering for students that may not be as verbal or may not be receiving support, and I'll certainly look and screen, but I'm trying to loop back around as much as I can if I pick up on anything. And the hope is that the teacher being in the classroom may also pick up on that or see something that they can then look for. So I don't know if that answers your question completely, but.
Yeah, no, I think it does. And my second question, which I think I asked you the first time that you were here, was just, obviously there are a lot of existing programs at all of the elementary schools, and they're not necessarily the same elementary school to elementary school. And you had said at that time you weren't sure how things were sort of going to evolve. So I was can you elaborate a little bit more on kind of what's happening with the existing programs, the new PATH programs in the different kind of schools that we have? Thank you.
So in PATH, one of the posters I use, a feelings poster, it has 2 colors, it's yellow and blue. And I could tell that was confusing for some of our students that are familiar with the Zones of Regulation program. So, I'm not looking to completely, like I had mentioned before, make anything too overwhelming or confusing. So I've spoken to that. I'm so familiar with zones that I knew to pick up on where they were saying, they're like, where does this color go and where does that color go? So, I again trying to normalize that for right now, whatever they're using that's helping them to express themselves, keep using that. And I'm saying the same thing to teachers is if this is working for you right now, let's keep going there and eventually it'll overlap. I haven't felt too much of a conflict. I think a lot of it is just it's all kind of going around about a similar way. This just across the three elementary schools is starting to normalize and make it consistent language. And that's why I'm so happy to get the posters starting to come in. And my style is I'm not going to go and ask teachers to put them up. I'm going to probably email out and say, I have the posters. Is anyone interested in starting to use them? And like roll them out so I can get teachers like sort of support versus feeling like I'm pushing it out right now. So I think I feel like it's going to organically happen, and I feel like the kids are already, I'm getting some parent emails. So just so you know, as far as my community outreach, I'm doing, every Monday morning, I'm sending out emails to all the teachers, giving them a heads up about the schedule, about the topic I'm doing, and any references I can attach. And then every Friday, I'm doing I don't know if there's any parents here that are here getting my Friday emails. So I'm trying to elaborate more because the past parent emails are very vague. And I got one parent feedback asking for more, and so I'm trying to elaborate more. So I'm putting like quick little paragraphs and summaries to not overwhelm. If you have like 3 or 4 kids, I apologize because I'm doing them by grade level so that they can get a little bit more. So I'm trying to I figure parents that are interested, families, I should say, are interested, that's great. If they're not, they can just kind of, delete it. But I'm trying to spread the language and the lessons to homes and across to the teachers so that it starts to really get embedded. So.
All right, thank you very much.
I want to thank both of you. I think the school committee has been trying to get these 2 positions for a few years, so it's wonderful to see that we were able to put these positions in and that they're working out so well. And I thank the principals for moving you guys forward and helping to make sure that it's a successful program. Anybody have anything else? Thank you both very much.
Can I just add one last thing?
No.
So SEL has been a buzzword in education for a few years now, and it's taken a negative connotation in some circles. So I just want to say to Julie, thank you for your approach. And I know this has been a lot of work with the principals as well. Overwhelmingly, the response has been positive. That doesn't mean there aren't some who have pushed back, but I think just the overall approach, and that this isn't voodoo science or voodoo magic. This is about talking about feelings and being better humans. So it's worked, and I'm appreciative of the approach that Julie's taken. And so to both Joe and Julie, this is not an ideal setting or arrangement when you have one individual servicing upwards of 1,000 students across the 3 elementaries. And while we would like more, it's successful because of the 2 women sitting at the end of this table. So Joe and Julie, thank you both for the work you've been doing.
And I also have some cute pictures too.
Yeah. And thank you to the principals for being here, too.
The next item is the superintendent's report. Brian will provide his monthly report.
As a few folks have mentioned, and Andrew mentioned, we've been dealing with illness. I put the statistic in here. We had one day where there were 97 students absent at the high school, and there was only a handful of those, a large handful, that was due to COVID. So flu and strep and just the bug has been going around. So, and I've heard several of the nurses say that sometimes in some days it's felt worse than COVID, just with the numbers that have been out. So continue to be vigilant, encouraging hand washing and other good hygiene. So we did hand out COVID tests prior to Thanksgiving, encourage families to use one prior to the return from Thanksgiving. There was a pretty good number of students and staff who tested positive and didn't return, so that's a good thing. We'll do the same thing. The second test will be used after Christmas. Put a note in here about the POW MIA chair that was installed. I shared that with you last month. It was an incredible ceremony. Doug Aylward did an incredible job organizing that. Had Senator Bruce Tarr come, who is our lone senator now, and did a nice fitting tribute. And particularly to note, the student body was so respectful. It was the entire middle school, entire high school student body, faculty and staff. And when folks, regardless of who was talking through the ceremony, you could have heard a pin drop in the stadium, which is not common. So moving, fitting, and I'm so proud that we have that out there in the stadium. Andrew mentioned the Adams, I think you took my report. Adams Family was awesome. I don't know if you had a chance to see it. Hopefully you did. It was great. It was Natalie Safely, the new theater teacher's premiere performance. So this bodes well and has set the bar high for future shows. And again, one more plug. There'll be we swapped. It used to be musical in the spring, play in the fall. So there's musical in the fall now. There'll be a play in the spring, and then Frozen Triton will be the only high school in the state of Massachusetts that's producing Frozen next fall. Note here, I went to you probably saw it on the news, and there was actually Channel 5 covered it and panned to the audience and found me sitting looking at my phone. So thank you to those who screen captured that and sent it to me.
Technically, you look like you were sleeping.
I was looking. So moving on. So I'm hopeful that there is a start, that it was a start to more fruitful statewide efforts. So Governor-elect Healy, obviously she started this effort as Attorney General, now Governor-elect. Her office, along with MASS and MIA and all other agencies, brought in Dana Barrows, did the pep talks. There were some big names. But towards the latter part of the day, there were some powerful discussions about bringing equity to sports, not just to address hate, but in general. And it was really powerful. So the next step is there are going to be 13 regional sessions, hopefully kicking off starting as soon as January. So I'm hopeful that not just through high school sports, but in general, there's an effort here to addressing hate generally in schools. So I'm hopeful it was a nice kickoff. Last month, I reported to you that we were in the process of developing a library reconsideration process or a challenge process. So you now have, starting on the second page, it's now page 3, all of page 3 and 4 and on to page 5 is the process. That is not a policy. This aligns with, you have one policy it aligns with, IJL. There was a discussion last month about, does this apply to classroom libraries as well? So my understanding is it applies to collections of instructional materials, so this would. I'm going to forget the library, all the different groups and what are all the different groups called? All the different guides, the different guides, the different library associations and the guides that this is based on. I think it said it right up at the top, right? I'm scrolling too far. American Library Association, Mass Library Systems, Merrimack Valley. So all of the various structures, the Library Bill of Rights, that's what I was looking for, that this is based on. So this is not recreated by Triton, so there's a good model. Our librarians did great work along with Anna to put this together. This is now posted on the district website on the curriculum page. It's not, doesn't stand out really on the district page, but then it's prominently linked on each of the school-based library pages. If that happens, we have not had that happen yet, but now I feel much better knowing we have a process. So this was reviewed by council, and on page, the right to appeal to the school committee. So after if the local decision isn't accepted, could appeal to the superintendent and then could appeal to the school committee. So continuing to add layers. So probably a when rather than an if, but we have the process in place. Just a quick update, we are continuing to roll out the standard response. Oh, questions?
I just have a quick question on
Yeah.
that. I had actually recently read an article about a gentleman who moved to Florida so that he could challenge books in Florida specifically, and he was challenging books not where he lived. I'm encouraged to see it says community members, parents, guardians, or community members, but is there a definition of community members somewhere? I wonder if somebody could be living in, wherever, Danvers, and decide to file complaints against a set of books in all of the area districts.
we'll have to do a little digging on that. I would venture to say that the term community members was not used as a legal term of art.
Yeah.
Right? There's not a definition behind it. I guess if someone who was out of town challenged, you are, right, so you are elected officials within the 3-member communities of Newbury, Raleigh, Salisbury. So you get to decide, right? So if it gets pushed all the way to you, that's it, right? That's where it ends. And if you say, you're in Danvers? Oh, thanks for coming. Have a wonderful evening. Then that can be the end of it. But we can get a little more detail about that.
I was just curious if it was
Yeah.
defined somewhere that wasn't apparent from what was.
Yeah, I don't think it intentionally, none of the drafts and none of the information I've read explicitly tried to say, and if you're an out-of-town resident, don't bother trying.
Yeah, okay.
So.
All right, thank you.
Is there, I'm just thinking about the potential work. God, these are very loud tonight.
Very sensitive.
I'll sit back here. No, I just, like, it's great that it could end with us,
Yeah.
but I also wouldn't want to see your office flooded with
Yeah.
that type of request before it, and having to refer it to us every time as well.
Yeah.
That does seem a worthwhile.
If it's out, yeah, we could do some work to see. I mean, right, so any law, even if it's said, you have to be here until it's challenged, doesn't matter what the law says. So we could certainly, I'm hearing you all say, your emphasis is on the community, right? So for us to say, this applies to our community members. So if you're not a member of our community, you don't have a right and let someone challenge. So I'm more than happy to say that. I see nods. Game on. Thank you all. Any other questions on that? No? Standard response protocol, just to let you know, we're still working through that. Ordering materials has taken forever, just like everything else has been backed up. So those posters are going to be getting into classrooms in the emergency folders. Safety teams have been training internally with staff, ready to roll that out with students after the holidays, so then that will become more broadly information that's disseminated to families. Again, not a real change in protocol, it's the change in the language and standardizing our response across the district for any emergency, including lockdowns. And finally, I got the call while at that conference on Thursday that we were not accepted. No, let me rephrase that. We are not being recommended for acceptance into eligibility period at the MSBA Board of Directors meeting next Wednesday, the 21st. So it doesn't become official until that point. So I will get correspondence. I did get a call from Diane Sullivan from the MSBA explaining the details behind. We knew we were one of 23 that was a finalist, if you will, when they came on the site visit. And there were things that changed between the site visit and our application, the site visit. You've been hearing about the fact that they closed the accelerated repair program for next year just because of the escalated costs. So I was reassured we'd remain a viable project. Got the call on Thursday. On Friday, I got the email, get excited, it's the statement of interest period for 2023 in my inbox. So it hurt a little bit, stung, but we will be resubmitting in the spring. Thankfully, the MSBA makes it quite easy now to be able to take all the work we did over those 2-3 months, they'll repopulate it into the new program, the new year program. We'll do some tweaking, updating. But the recommendation from Diane is you don't need to change a thing in your statement of interest. There was nothing where we were deficient in information or didn't prove the case that it was needed. I know there were two, I don't know if they will be recommended yet, but there were two districts that were part of the 23 that were in the running but didn't get a senior study because they had a senior study the year prior. So my guess is that's where we'll land. We'll state that we'll have another statement of interest. We'll be a contender. We'll see how many apply. I mean, the odds were very good this year with only 54 applicants. It will be a significantly lower number of districts welcomed in, and that's the reason why we're not welcomed in. So more to follow. We had talked about the Plan B, right? What do we do? In talking with Kyle, we are certainly staying the course with our plan that we shared last month to move 500 of E&D into stabilization, as well as moving $1 million of ESSER funds into stabilization. That will be in an adjusted budget that will come to the Finance Subcommittee. I think we're meeting next week, and then come to you as a full committee in January. That puts that money aside to deal with whatever needs to be dealt with. Ideally, we are leaving that, and we are able to fund the feasibility study a year delayed. But if in the interim something happens, it does give us a pot of funds to be able to address. Certainly not going to spend $11 million to put a new roof on, but if there is a major repair that's needed to span the 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, then we would have some funding available. Not the first choice, but that's still the recommended path. Any questions?
So I guess first, this is profoundly disappointing. I just, my heart sank, I think, when I got that email and heard the news. A couple of things. I think it's important for the committee to have a discussion about reaffirming Kyle's plan to still move that money, given that was contingent on or the idea was that when accepted, that was going to be feasibility money, that continues to be the plan, is to move that money. So I think I would appreciate it if the committee could have a discussion to reaffirm that. I also think.
Saying now?
Not now.
Okay.
No, obviously.
Because it will be the discussion in January with the amended budget.
Perfect. I also, if it's the will of the chair, would ask that the committee have a discussion on whether we need to change our reserve plan, because our current reserve plan calls for OPEB to be funded first and then reserves in later years. And I wonder if this would change our strategy and priorities in that. And I don't know where it exists. And again, I would put this back to the will of the chair, but I think it seems like the amount of money coming to the MSBA is funding significantly less projects than it has in the past, which weren't sufficient before by many estimations, that we have an advocacy conversation with our legislators and anyone that they are willing to bring to the table, or we can convince them to bring to the table, to have a conversation about putting more money into that pot. Like, how does more money get there? I think, again, if it's your will, I think that's something that the committee should be having a discussion on.
So I was with legislators today and did speak with them, made them aware that we didn't get it or have been recommended to not be accepted or welcomed into eligibility. I think there's an understanding there, just as a reminder, MSBA is funded by a penny of every dollar on the 6.25% sales tax in the state. So in times of good, more money goes in. Their funding structure is fairly straightforward. So there's a set carve out of money. There was no stimulus money, if you will, that was put in throughout. There was a push for that. Understandably, we've had these same discussions around the table. We didn't use ESSER for operating costs because we can't, because those will go away and we end up with that funding cliff. This is not a funding cliff situation, right? However, it is a funding cliff in that if you build the program, everyone I've spoken with has said that they don't expect a precipitous drop-off in the costs of construction. So, for example, $600 a square foot, $700 a square foot, not too long ago, the norm, the project's bidding out at $1,000 a square foot. So that is expected to not precipitously drop off. The hope is that it stops increasing and maybe it relaxes a little bit. But if they used federal dollars to backfill that, they will have, and eventually it will come home to roost, right, that challenge. So I think it's absolutely worth a discussion, especially if this is the new norm, that is it 2 cents on the dollar? Is it 3 cents? Is it another funding mechanism?
Or there was
is it
a ballot question
tax?
that just passed.
Yep. So, I mean, there's lots of debate about how much that will actually generate and how much structure there really is and where that money goes. but there's funding available, was just told today, $724 million so far this year. The state's already running in the clear, ahead of benchmark. So there's definitely an opportunity. I think there's an interest and an understanding there. I would say as far as the rest of the discussions, Marissa was speaking about the plan is to add 75,000, like we did for kindergarten, to add 75,000 per year for the next 4 years. We had said 75, then 150 total goes to OPEB first, and then the years 3 and 4. I agree 100%. That is easily a discussion that we'll have. It will absolutely be in our budget proposal, that 75,000, and we will have an opportunity to discuss that throughout the budget process about where it goes. Even after the money's budgeted, you could do that next year if you wanted to. But I agree with you 100% that let's bulk that up first. Maybe for a few years, maybe after 4 years, that 300,000, maybe it all goes to stabilization for a bit before OPEB. I think Kyle would disagree with me because the OPEB is an important number if we're eventually going to, or no, when we eventually bond a project. So we do need to attack OPEB as well. But I think there's a balance there, and we'll have opportunity for discussion for sure.
Yeah, that's why I didn't want to do it tonight, but I think we do need to have reaction, and some of those reactions need to be relatively speedy. It can't be March when we're having our budget conversations with the legislators that we're also having this conversation, because I think that leaves a span of time where they could potentially be looking at other options outside of the annual budget process and hopefully, considering other things that they might put forward as a bill. And we don't want to miss that window. So again, I'd like to see those things come before committee, subcommittee. I don't know how you would want to approach that, but I would appreciate it if those things could be addressed.
Me and Brian will have a discussion, and we'll figure out where we're going to put them.
Perfect. That is my report. Happy to answer any other questions if you have them.
Anybody have a question?
Can I add one more thing? On the personnel report, we're still hiring people, so we're slowly but surely chipping away. We are nowhere near normal yet, but slowly but surely we're chipping away. Finally, after I think a year and a half, maybe close to 2 years, being down a custodian, Pine Grove is now fully staffed with custodians. So the contract we settled, that you all settled with the AFSCME unions, didn't yield 1 million applicants, but enough interest, and so baby steps. Bus drivers, not so much.
Can I just say in the meantime, too, not to whatever, but when I was at the Pine Grove Craft Fair, there was a gentleman who was formerly a school custodian elsewhere who actually approached Yari to compliment him on the state of the building, and that was with one custodian down. So they are truly doing a phenomenal job doing, all the buildings with a lack of the appropriate number of staff.
Well said.
Can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to receive and file the December 2022 Superintendent's Report as presented.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? The next item is the memorials on school grounds policy. At the October business meeting, the committee received a presentation on the proposal for landscaping and grounds work in front of the stadium. There was discussion on policy FFA in regard to bricks and benches that were included in the proposal. The committee referred the matter to the Policy and Advocacy Subcommittee for their review. I am going to turn this over to Paul Goldner, the chair of the subcommittee, for an update.
Okay. I think the statement that's in the agenda sort of covers it, but that essentially we believe the policy that we have in place shouldn't be amended. The benches are subject to the policy and are not allowed based on our existing language, but the bricks, in our opinion, are not a permanent memorial and are therefore not governed by the policy. So if people want to put names on there, it's not covered by the policy, it's fine. Although some people have chosen to use them as memorials, that's not the intent of the project. And if we, as a full committee, would like to include the engraved benches in that project, then the subcommittee thinks that we should waive the policy for that project. is essentially what we discussed and decided. We think those are permanent memorials, and there's a limited number of them. And so they would be permanent structures if they were there. It would be limited access. We don't want to use the school grounds as a memorial site. So that's why that policy is there.
Does anybody have any comment on that particular policy?
I just wanted to say, I don't think anyone would doubt that, I know one of the original intents in approaching us on the benches was to memorialize Ron Corkin, and this is absolutely not about him. This is about just the concept in general. He is absolutely worthy of every honor that Triton can bestow upon him, but the benches, or memorials, permanent memorials in general, are something that I think that is entirely a different deal. So.
Do we want to leave the policy the way it is?
I was going to say, I think there's two questions, right? So the subcommittee was recommending don't touch the policy.
Right.
It's good. The question becomes, and if you all agree, there doesn't need to be action, the question becomes, do you want to allow the benches? And if you do, then you need to vote to waive your policy.
Right.
So that's, and again, it can continue to next month. We're not installing them anytime soon. It's a little chilly out there. But again, TEF has approved the funding for all of the landscaping on the corner of the building up against the stadium building, and then that whole brick garden area, as well as another big spruce tree over there. So that funding is all accounted for through TEF.
I personally didn't want to see the policy changed because I think the bricks are okay, but you only have 2 benches, and I just don't think it should be a memorialization of them. That's just my opinion.
So when we were talking about it, we were also discussing the limitations on the number of benches and space available on property, and that's really what the driving decision was with not changing it. We were concerned that there would be a fairness and equity piece involved if somebody had decided that they wanted something else placed on property and we would just run out of space, or it wouldn't be ideal for where placement would be suggested. So that's why we felt we should go in this direction.
If nobody has any strong feelings on changing the policy, then I guess we'll just leave it the way it is.
So to confirm, not changing the policy and not wanting to waive the policy to allow the benches.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Say that one more time.
I was going to say memorial benches,
Right.
not putting a memorial on a bench
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah, so it still could be that if the funding through TEF could pay for the benches, right? There's a picture, I think.
Right.
Did I include an actual picture of the bench? Those are engraved. Doesn't have to be engraved. So the design has 4 benches around that center that's largely full of purchased bricks already. Okay.
And the benches look very nice without engraving on them.
Yep.
We'll move on to the dress code. Superintendent is going to begin by giving us an overview of the proposed dress code language.
So this was brought to the Policy and Advocacy Subcommittee on November 9th. There was a slight tweak. Very clarified. I think it was the hats may be allowed, but they'll vary by school, the principal's discretion. That was pulled out of students cannot wear. So this policy was the product of lots of time Feel free to jump in if you want to speak to the process at all, Anna. But there was a working group that met last year. Anna and Kara Briley, our wellness coordinator, co-led that group. Spent a lot of time looking at other models, other districts, best practice, and had students involved, had parents involved, in really looking at what were the challenges. This was not something I or Anna or Shannon or someone said, hey, let's redo the policy. This was actually students who brought it forward and said, we would love to review this. So feel free to jump in if you want to add more if I didn't.
Sure, I just want to give Kara Briley credit for the facilitation of this group because, as Brian said, it was students, parents, administrators, teachers, and with quite diverse viewpoints. And we met often, but we met in a virtual environment, and I think facilitating anything in that environment can be a challenge. And she just did an amazing job of keeping the focus on equity and really, I think, valuing the opinions of all the members of the group, but particularly the students who I think were happy to have a voice in this process. So it was a lot of work. She certainly led that work. I just helped her kind of plan the meetings in advance and sat in and watched her do that. So wanted to recognize her for that.
So ultimately, this is, many districts are doing this at the same time, and this can be the third rail, right? It's the old policy where girls' skirts have to be the fingertip lengths, and so if you've got really long arms, well, you've got to wear long skirts. And so, the shoulder this and the spaghetti straps and bra straps. So looked at a lot of examples. Ultimately, the working group came up with a version. Concurrently, Michael Joyce, who was our attorney, was doing this with several other districts and ultimately came up with a model, pretty much this, some tweaks, came up with a model. I brought it back to the working group to say, I appreciate the work you did. Here's what our attorney has said. This will work. This is enforceable. This protects the rights of individuals, freedom of speech, individuality, takes away gender, question of gender and racial and ethnic preferences and cultural norms. So ultimately, that group said, actually, we like this. We like that it still has the things that students cannot wear. This lists students must wear, students cannot wear. There was a may wear, and we ultimately pulled that out because it was just like, okay, I'm watching your nod. That list could get really long. And so it was the kind of the common things like pajamas on pajama day. But then what about not on pajama day? Pajamas, look like sweatpants. So we ultimately took that out, and the policy now dictates what must be worn: shirt, bottom, shoes, shirts, pants, and dresses have to have fabric in the front, back, and on the sides, and clothing that covers all undergarments. And then this more, clarifying information, and then what students cannot wear. And again, much more vague, right? It doesn't say any specific type of clothing. It's violent images. It's depicting drugs, alcohol, hate speech, profanity, pornography, hoods, helmets, anything that obscures the face. So I'm not going to read it, obviously. Pulled out there below the bulleted, it says hats may be allowed, but that will vary by school and be at the principal's discretion. That was largely elementary students are not, and middle school students are not allowed to wear hats. At the high school, they are. It's been an ongoing discussion. So I think based on age level, that's an appropriate thing for that to be part of the kind of the culture and the discussion within the school, in the community. And then the dress code enforcement, there's a lot of thought and language behind how this is enforced. Ultimately, the first bullet was not part of our attorney's model, and this came out of the working group, and I really like this, where it says, if a student is not adhering to the dress code guidelines, school administration will discreetly and respectfully address this with the student during non-instructional time when possible. So this isn't about shaming. This is not about pulling kids out of learning time to teach them a lesson. Again, If a student is repeatedly and purposefully, well, then now we're not talking about dress code. Now we're talking about, willful disobedience, and that has a whole set of consequences. So this is where we landed. The working group, prior to bringing it to the policy subcommittee, we did put it out to public comment, as I said we would do. Nope, that's the bench. That's not the public comment. So you do have the public comments here. Obviously, you don't have the identifying name, but you have all of the comments as they were presented, some really thoughtful comments. And ultimately, some folks will never understand and won't like it. Some, I've had some follow-up discussions, and people don't like it, but at least they understand the reasoning for it. So I'll leave it at that. See if there's any questions. So I think the way I said I'll leave it at that, and I kept talking. I believe the policy subcommittee did not make, or I don't know if you were ready to make a recommendation and say, we recommend this as a first draft, first reading. I believe that was the plan, but that you then wanted the public comments there with it. So the hope that's
Yes, that's what we
okay. Yes. Emphatic response.
Is there any comments on the dress code?
I just want to express support for that first bullet point that you pointed out. I think that might be the most important piece in there. But beyond that, just thinking from the point of view of an educator, the must-wear portion I think is helpful. It clarifies it, and I would imagine that will make enforcement easier. But I think that one of the biggest issues is how teachers, administrators handle that piece. So I'm really pleased to see that in there.
If I can say to Paul's point, this is not bulletproof, right? This is not clear cut. It can't be. Like I kept saying to our attorneys, we want it clear cut. Just do it. It can't be, right? So this does leave it up to building administration to make a call. And right in that first paragraph, the standard is set. Students are required to be dressed in a manner that is compatible with an effective learning environment, and more specifically, a manner that does not interfere with the health, safety, and welfare of themselves and others. So those are the three magic bullets. When we get to the point of saying you can't wear this because it's a health issue, it's a safety issue, it's about your neighbor's welfare, it's about disrupting, the shirt may not be, it may be your free speech to have that on your shirt, but if it's disrupting the school environment so much, we can say you have to take it off, because free speech is now interfering with the job of what we're doing here in the school, which is learning. So. You were on.
I want to thank the committee for all the work that was done for this, especially handing it to the community and the students. I think if you get them involved, they'll be more engaged to even explain it to other students when they see them violating the policy. So I'll be making a motion to recommend as a first reading. Okay, can I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the Triton dress code policy as presented as a first reading.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? The next item,
So we'll bring it back in January for a second and final reading.
the next item is the policy update, section D. I will hand this to Paul Goldner as well.
I'm really disappointed in Kyle Warren for not being here tonight.
Well played, Kyle.
We have an awful lot of policies that we've been reviewing since, Paul Mayette says last December, and that sounds approximately correct. The MASC put out a bunch of proposed revisions, and we went through all of those revisions and compared them to our existing policies, and in places adopted The recommendations in places said this makes no sense, we're doing what we need to be doing, and in places sort of made some tweaks to both our policy and MASC's policy. But overall, a lot of what we did aligns with the practices that are in place already, and puts our practices into policy because they are good practices that make us financially transparent. Do you have anything else to add?
So the only thing I would add is, started last December, we're pretty much ready over the summer, getting them all edited, and then MASC came out with another round of edits for Policy File D. And so, again, there were some that changed, about half of them changed again, or we at least reviewed them again. So what you have now is all of the recommendations. So, I mean, we can certainly answer, I'm certainly happy to answer any questions you might have on those. I don't think we need to read through them all. I don't think there's any major change as far as our practice, our procedures. There was some language in MASC that we liked. There were some policies that we didn't have that just codifies practice that MASC has now a template for that we're proposing adopting, but it doesn't change any of our practice. And they have Kyle's blessing. He told me I have to say that.
Can I get a motion?
Make a motion to approve the updates to the various policies in Section D as presented based on guidance and advice from the MASC.
I second that motion.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Can I ask, was that a first reading, or? It doesn't have to be. I mean, your policy is that you do a first and second reading, generally with things like the dress code policy. People walk away, have a conversation, sometimes people contact you. I don't think there's going to be a lot of people reaching out to you to talk about these policies. I could be wrong.
So we have to make an amendment.
Were we voting on the assumption that it was not first reading since it wasn't said?
Yeah, so it would be final.
Who made the motion?
I made the motion.
What did you intend?
I intended to read it as it said here, and so that would imply that it is final. But if we would like to change it, I am all about that too.
I think I wrote that and just really wanted to be done with this.
I feel that the finality came through.
Can we leave it as a final reading?
I certainly, Kyle, I mean, I could speak.
Do you have any
We have
issues
no
with
issues.
having a final reading?
I was voting on that assumption since it was.
That it was final?
Okay, final.
It's final. We'll get them updated in board docs.
Okay, sorry. That's okay, it's the way I wrote it, sorry.
It's okay, I read it.
The next item is the preschool tuition rates. I'm going to turn it back over to Brian for a proposal on preschool tuition rates.
Yes, so we have not increased rates since 2016. There's a balance here, right? Right from the outset, Ann and I have had a lot of conversations about this. We have pretty steadily increased the other funding sources that we use for preschool, because we believe if we invest in preschool, we bring students in earlier, they receive the services they need, and they won't necessarily need services that could be costly, tier 2, tier 3, right on up onto special education qualified services. That's always been our mantra. That still is. However, I wanted to make sure we had a conversation about the fact that of the roughly 617,000 that it costs just for preschool tuitions, only about half of that is coming from tuitions at this point. So there's a chunk coming out of school choice and a couple $100,000 coming out of the general fund. Doesn't matter. Those are all kind of just other than the tuition. So doing some research in the area, we are one of a few schools that offer tuition assistance of any kind. If you look at if you go statewide, it varies, obviously. There's universal preschool in places. But in the area, the only other district that offers any type of tuition remission is Ipswich. It's pretty similar to what we do. We currently if a family qualifies for free lunch, they pay no tuition. If a family qualifies for reduced lunch, they pay a 50% of the tuition. Ipswich's tuition rates are significantly higher than ours. So we've got we're the only one that has the more reasonable rates, and we're competitive with Pentucket and Newburyport, which tends to be our competition. If we're going to lose kids, those are the programs where they tend to go. And those districts do not offer any tuition remission of any kind. There are districts who shall not be named that offer tuition remission, but it's literally will admit that it depends. You have to know who to ask. So they don't advertise it, but if someone asks, they will share the information. So that is not any of the districts that touch Triton. But so right, so there's a balance here of making sure that we're being fiscally prudent in a program that is not compulsory, that is not required to be offered, that is a privately funded requirement for parents. In kindergarten, we now have universal full-day K. So there isn't a desire to recoup a ton of money, but I think it's also important that we're keeping that balance, and that we're at least, if not a little more, tuition funded than we are other funded. So the proposal here is, rather than increasing rates, because that affects everyone, keep the rates as they are now. Again, they haven't been adjusted since 2016. There's been some tweaks in rates, but it's been about changing the number of hours a program meets. So the hourly rate, if you will, has been used to make some tweaks. For example, we never had a 5-day. It's a full 5 days. It's actually 4.5 days. Wednesday is a half day. Didn't have that until 2 years ago. Started that, right, Anna? So what we're proposing here is keep the same rates, adjust tuition so that if someone qualifies for free or reduced lunch, I don't know if you know the metrics aren't far between free and reduced. It's not a huge span. So saying if you are either free or reduced lunch, if your family qualifies, that you would have a 50% reduction in any of the half-day programs. The full-day programs are certainly those that would like it, can send their kid there via tuition. A lot of those students are there based on an IEP in needing those extended services. So those families, if they're there because of an IEP placement, they're not paying anything anyway. So not offering any remission on that 5-day program, which keeps the slots available for the kids who have qualified and need the program and those who would like to pay for it. But reducing it, and anyone free or reduced lunch would have a 50% remission on any of the half-day programs. Years ago, we had a sibling discount. There were some questions about, do we still? So just reconfirming there isn't a sibling discount, and we're confirming that, or we're proposing here that we continue to not have a sibling discount. Yeah, did I miss anything?
Does anybody have any questions on?
Brian, can you talk a little bit about volume and capacity levels? Do we turn people away from the preschool program at all? Do we have a lot more applicants than we have seats?
Now Anna's going to start talking.
So was the question, do we turn them? So we haven't. In the last few years, but we also have pushed our class sizes to very high limits in some of the pre-K classes. So we are working very hard to set reasonable caps for the beginning of the school year, knowing that we're going to have a number of students qualify through early intervention at different points in the year, but not knowing exactly what that number is going to be. In particular at Newbury Elementary, we want to set those caps a little bit lower because of the programming that they have there. So it is possible, I think, moving forward, that we could have to have a wait list for our programs.
So do you see, I'm staying along the same line of question, do you see that if a child starts in the Triton District program, that they continue kindergarten, first grade, the whole bit and stay with the school? Or do we see that people are going elsewhere? Because we're talking a lot about making sure that we retain students in our district and not having them look elsewhere. And I want to get a sense for your thoughts on whether or not switching it immediately to a half for somebody that has the need, as opposed to like a 3/4, like what that may translate into if they start making friends in another district because somebody else is offering something different, or they're able to get funding somewhere else to go if we don't end up with those students back in our programs.
Yeah, so it's pretty normal. There are a lot of private preschools. So we very routinely and regularly have students attending Parker River, right? It's right at the front of Pine Grove School, right? So there's a lot of kids who enter Pine Grove after having attended Parker River. There are smaller private preschools, there are larger private kindergarten, and there are larger places. So I don't think there's a correlation necessarily that if we end up having a wait list, we're going to lose kids that are coming in kindergarten. I don't think families tend to move because of preschool, because you're not entitled to anything based on where you live. Starting in kindergarten, that's where you have a right to attend your home district. Secondary to that, again, to reiterate what Anna's saying, we haven't created wait lists. And again, this is people wanting to be out of the goodness of everyone's hearts. And then ultimately, we end up with these really large classrooms that are problematic. All of the intentions to put those kids together were pure. But then when we have a student who ages in at age 3 and needs services, we have to provide those services, and the most cost-effective way is to have them into the program and not providing piecemeal services. So we have to bring that student in. So it's, we've collectively decided that we need to restrict the start of the year numbers a little more. Doesn't mean we're chopping it by 50%, but doing a little more restricting. That's going to yield a little less money, right? Because we're not taking all those tuitions in, which is why we're feeling the need to recoup some of that. If those families tried to go to other places, there could be other, like the YMCA can sometimes have private money that will pay, but our sliding scale as it exists isn't a sliding scale, it's just free if you're free, is non-existent. So if someone goes off, and I don't know all the private school rates and the tuition, there could be private funding, other mechanisms, but if they were to go to any other public school programs, they wouldn't get any remission at all. So even at 50%, it's still a significant reduction, and it's going to be, our rates are still lower. Pentucket and Newburyport and Triton have very similar rates. And we're lower than the districts surrounding us, which we like, right? We want to keep that. And then it's lower than the private schools, so even if you went to a private school and had a 60% reduction, you still may pay more than a 50% reduction because our rates are lower to begin with. So it definitely, it makes families have to be a little bit more of a consumer than just saying, hey, we can offer you this free program. But I don't believe there'll be any kind of mass exodus at the preschool level. Again, if we were talking about kindergarten, whole other ball of wax. People start to make decisions about where they buy homes, planning for kindergarten.
Got kind of like a paired set of questions. Do we know the number of families that are currently receiving that 100% discount, not with the IEP factored in, but?
Yes. Kyle has it.
Nicely done.
Yes. I might be able to, remember he shared that with us.
I have it.
You have it?
I can, but I need a second to
Okay.
look at it.
Do you have another question while Anna does some research?
It's a follow-up, I mean, it's related, but do we have any sense of the amount that we would have to raise tuition across the board to recoup the same amount of money? Is that something that we looked at? I'm just curious.
I
If we
wanna
spread
say-
that out.
Looking at that sheet, to change to this proposal, which is a standard 50%, generated about 60,000. Is that ringing a bell?
I feel like it was like 60-something. 60-something thousand in the full-day program alone was what we were not bringing in from free or reduced.
Yeah, so So I think you're right, yeah. So it's
So we'd recoup about 30.
in the half-days. Well, in here, we're saying there's no reduction for the 5-day program. And again, that's largely based on people who need that, and the majority of them are needing it because of an IEP. So there's another separate discussion about making sure that the qualification process to be able to get a free program is accurate and effective, and kids who genuinely need to qualify are qualifying and getting that service. But that's different. That's not about a fee. That's about a process and a structure.
I'm just curious because I struggle with the price increase going to those who are neediest if it could be a nominal increase across the board. So that's why I was wondering about what how much we would have to raise the prices across the board to achieve the same. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
That word.
It was not, I would say it was not nominal, right? And I guess the concern there is we're then not competitive with back to your question, Erin, then we're not competitive with our closest neighbors. So families who can't afford are still going to be, smart with their money, and if they can take a program in the Newburyport schools or private, the programs are phenomenal and speak for themselves. We definitely compete, or I would argue better than many of the private programs. But it is a competition, right? At that level, it's consumer driven, so it's providing a product. So I see the point. And right, so there's the converse of this is we make no change, or we change just the 5-day program, right? Leave everything else the same, and it's just you can't have the 5-day program. There's no reduction on that. And we're not recouping as much of the money. If the committee is aware of that, and aware that we're moving towards, and maybe liking, moving more towards a universal preschool, then that's an okay approach too.
I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we table this conversation until Kyle can be back and provide us the requisite answers to our questions.
So do you have?
So I just shared it with you too, so you
Oh.
can also check my math here. But if somebody could, what was the question?
What was the
How
question?
much money?
I think it was the number of people it impacts.
Which really was just the entryway into the second part of what I was asking is how much are we looking to recoup, and what does that look like spread across?
Sorry, having a conversation about if something needed to be done with my motion right away, but it wasn't seconded, so we're good.
Did I cut you off?
No.
If someone wanted the opportunity to second?
Paul was just looking at me like, what are you chatting about over there?
I thought we left Marissa's motion and then moved on, and I just wanted to make sure that we recognize the motion was made, and if there's no second, that's fine.
I'll second it.
If anyone wants. I was just nervous that we'd go on unended. So now yeah, some discussion.
And this mic is dumb.
Do you have that answer?
So I have, and it's the second tab, Brian, is the one that has the accurate information on it. It's a little over $73,000 in free tuition across the programs that we have right now, and that would include the half-day as well as the full-day programs.
But Anna, that number is also people on IEPs, correct?
No.
No, okay, thank you.
And that includes the 5-day as well? Do you know how many are 5-day?
That includes the
These are really
5-day.
loud.
They're very loud tonight. That's why they're dying.
There's a motion on the table, but
Discussion is open, so.
I would be more apt to make the change to the 5-day and leave the rest alone. I don't think we should be affecting people that qualify for free lunch. And that's a lot of money, but it's a ton of money for the people that don't have it.
and again, it's not broken out in the sheet, I believe the majority of that 73,000 is from the full-day program.
It is.
And then just for comparison, there's 160,000 in waived tuition based on IEP designations.
Yeah, I'd be inclined to support the motion on the table. I'd love to see kind of all of the numbers in front of me to be able to make a good, I feel like I'd make a better opinion that way.
So the only downside to that is parent information. We were hoping to get information. We won't be able to give parents information at Parent Information Night. When's the first one?
The first one, look at my calendar, it's January.
We're meeting on January 11th. It's January 11th.
No, I believe it's the next week, and I can confirm that, but, so then we would put information, because that's what people are looking for, and they're already looking for it. What's the tuition? And I don't have an issue saying, we don't know yet.
Okay. So the motion was to table it, not, someone else was talking about
The motion's to,
just doing the, okay.
motion's table till Kyle comes back. And I've seconded. Does anyone else want to add to it?
I think we're looking for the more detailed breakdowns, so I think, I agree with tabling it. I guess I'm just looking for what would be the cost of this option as compared to some of, what was the other option? What did you say?
To just affect the 5-day program. And you said the majority of that money is the 5-day program, correct?
He was saying that he thought 66,000 was the 5-day program. So if we're doing it for the 5-day program, then 66,000 of the dollars would be coming in and they would not be getting funding at all?
Yeah, I had 60,000. I don't know. That's not a number
Okay.
on this page. It's just the 73,475 is the free tuition currently.
Can we also figure out like what alternatives would be? Like if we had them pay 25% and not 50%, what the tuition cost would be for across the board?
Yeah, so I guess the question comes down to, do you need to vote on them? Like, is this still discussion? This was, okay. We're talking about recouping $73,000, right? If you're not worried about recouping that $73,000, we can keep everything exactly the same. Anna would nod yes, right?
So you obviously came to us for a reason.
So we're shifting to more, especially as we move towards actually having a waiting list. We're shifting to, we're roughly 50-50 tuition and other funds based. So there's a little wiggle room there, but if we're accepting less students and we have wait lists, we're going to be bringing less revenue in, and we're going to shift more to more dependent on general fund or school choice, general funding, which again, it's not bad. This is about Kyle and I looking at this saying, years ago, preschool was funded out of revolving, right? Entirely. There were times when you look back and there were years when food services was funded and we billed utilities and benefits to that revolving account. So as this has shifted, if you're comfortable with us moving kind of slowly but surely towards universal free preschool, then that's an okay approach.
So I think you're taking it further than what this group has been discussing right now. I think you're making a leap into free. We're trying to figure out exactly like the reasons on like what the costs look like, what it would be to run the program if we need to reduce the numbers versus what we're bringing in and where we have wiggle room or what we're looking at being faced with for the district, for families that are making a decision. That's really what we're trying to get at.
Right, so we won't be able to give you a shortfall yet because we won't know how many slots we have. Right, so preschool, it develops based on census and registration, so we could have a class less, one class less, and end up having costs fall off and tuition falls off. So there's no way to really project. I mean, we have census data, but it's rarely accurate. So it is, I get it, that it's a semi-blind decision you have to make, and I know Kyle will be able to answer more detailed questions. I don't know he's going to have all the details you're looking for. He can probably break down that $73,000 in waived tuition. He'd be able to break down for you how much of that is based on the full-day classroom versus the half-day sections, and how many individuals are impacted by that.
I was just going to say, I think the other question, which I haven't heard asked yet, is how much of that, is that entirely 100, the free lunch? It doesn't include reduced, or is that a combination of free and reduced? So is that a combination of the 50% and the 100%?
Correct.
So some of those would be, my understanding, unaffected. No, I guess some of them would be affected. I guess I'd be curious about how that breakdown happens. And then I guess the other thing is talking about competitive programs, how many of these students actually reside in our district and would come into our schools eventually?
That's a good question. That I don't know. I know, I want to say the number is 2 or 3 reduced. Again, the threshold from reduced to free is so minor, the vast majority, similar to the whole food service program, like 98% are free, and then it's a small number for reduced.
Okay, the motion on the table is to table. The motion on the table is to table it until Kyle comes back. Is there any more discussion on that? All those in favor?
Is there a way, can you all send me the questions you have so that we can make sure that when we come back in January 11th, we're good, and then we can have all the presentations ready to plug it in on Thursday, and then it's ready to go the following week?
That was 1 week off. It's the week after, too.
Oh, we got time. We got
24th, 25th, and 26th are plenty of time.
just time to go home then.
This is going to make an excellent spreadsheet with all the variables. I think we could not deny Kyle that opportunity.
That's right.
But just to Anna's point about the emails, those dollar figures, those aren't on the table. So can we give parents who are asking now dollar figures and say we don't know what our tuition assistance, or are we talking about changing those dollar figures too?
Yeah, I heard the question, someone asked, I forget who asked the question, what would we have to, would it be a nominal increase in tuitions to offset the loss? So again, I would like, my recommendation, I'm not as, and again, I think Kyle would say the same thing, and I know Anna would, and I know Shannon would, right? We're okay with not recouping the costs if we're good. I want the tuition rates to stay the same because that's the competitive piece. I'm okay with adjusting the remission, the sliding scale, because we have something that exists nowhere. So there's part of me that says, yeah, let's be that, that district that gives it to those who need it. But that's the stronger opinion, is making sure those tuitions stay the same.
Okay.
See you in January.
The next item is subcommittee reports, policy and advocacy, Paul Goldner.
We met today. We talked about policies, a couple of different policies that we'll be bringing some revisions for you next month, leaving one alone and one revision. We also talked today about the superintendent's evaluation, and that last year we had a situation where our rating in the goals and our rating in the standards did not necessarily match, and how do we report to DESE, and looking at some ways of producing a evaluation report that we are all comfortable with how it was produced and providing a definitive answer to DESE that matches what data we're gathering. I think that will be the substantive ongoing discussion, and I'm missing something.
It was oh yeah, that does work. GBEA or whatever it was. It's the I was going to call it it's the romantically involved policy.
Yes, and we're looking at some
That's
of
what it
the
is.
ethics policies. So that was the other piece, yes. There you go. That will be coming next month.
To be clear, it's staff ethics and supervisors and supervisees, not just romantic relationships in general.
Thank you for that clarification, Brian. Thank you, Paul. Finance, Paul Mayette.
I think the most relevant piece of our discussion last meeting is, that we're starting to revert back to pre-COVID, some of the funding crunches here and there, particularly right now with the subs and all of that. And I'm guessing that probably has not changed since we met, that we're still over on that. Yes, and we meet again on Tuesday, and given the MSBA news, I'm guessing we'll have a lot to discuss there.
We'll have the adjusted fall budget,
Yes.
which is now the winter budget, on the agenda for the Finance Subcommittee.
Thank you, Paul. Personnel and negotiation, Paul Lees.
So we met with the TRTA Unit B yesterday. We're meeting with the TRTA Unit A tomorrow, and we have passed the 3 meetings where we raise issues, and now we're talking about negotiating the issues that are on the table. That's all I have.
Thank you, Paul. The next item is adjournment, but before we adjourn, there's a business meeting on January 11th. There's a budget meeting on January 17th, 18th, and 19th at 6 p.m. So I'd like everybody to have a happy holiday and enjoy your time off, and thank you all for what all of you do. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn?
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
All those in favor? Thank you.